Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. Today, we have a special guest. We have Al Robinette. Pleased to have him here today. And Al, welcome, and introduce yourself to our listeners and give us a little bit of your background to start out with.
Hey, Dave, good to see you again, and thanks for having me on.
Good. Glad to have you here, brother.
Absolutely. So those that haven't heard me, I do host a radio show here on KLDR as well called That's What I Read. And my background is IO psychology and behavioral science consulting in the private security industry.
Nice.
So it's a really cool field of work where we work with organizations and subject matter experts, and we design and develop the best talent strategies for the private security sector. It could be people with executive protection details and security roles, really kind of a neat industry to be a part of. So we have a lot of fun doing that out there.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, it's interesting when you, I always laugh that I heard years ago that there were three types of problems that businesses typically have, right? They either have people problems, process problems, or profit problems. And somehow it sounds like we both drew the short end of the stick and got the people problem end of it. But there's no shortage of business on that one, I guess.
No, absolutely. And the people element is something I'm very passionate about. And it's something that every organization is faced with, whether it's a small 10-person company or whether it's a large company with tens of thousands of employees. They're all facing the same strategy and challenge opportunities around their talent. Is, how do we pick and select the best talent? How do we train, develop, onboard the best talent? And then how do we build and grow them while they're on board? How do we keep them happy and improve that retention? So I think it's a universal strategy that every organization needs to have. But unfortunately, so many organizations don't have the strategy. They have strategies for their business models. They have strategies for their marketing. They have strategies for their 401k programs, healthcare strategies, but they don't always have strategies for their talent programs. So that's where we come in and we help put that together for them, because obviously you can't reach all your other goals if you don't have the right talent.
No, and I tell you what, nowadays with the hiring environment, it's not like you can just be, I'll be nice, a nasty individual anymore as a manager. They're trying to keep it nice for Chris on the radio end of it. But yeah, you just can't be a jerk and say there's 50 people waiting in line to take your job, because they're not 50 people. They're not 10 people. It really is one of those things where it's cheaper to keep her. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that retention is huge. And it doesn't take, I read some information from Gallup for a presentation not too long ago, and I believe they mentioned that it takes next to nothing to draw away somebody who's an actively disengaged or disengaged employee. You're like, all right, an extra nickel an hour, buck an hour, whatever. Okay, see you bye. A different company, different opportunity, different point of view, fine. But for somebody who's really highly engaged, it takes at least 20, 25% to even start to look at prying them away from that company. And so what do you want? Your people leaving out for nothing, or, hey, if they want my people, they're going to have to pay for it.
No, I agree. And there's been a lot of studies and research over the years about retention. And, we think about the Great Resignation last year that everybody's talked about, and it really has become an employee world versus an employer world. And so many organizations and industries have been struggling to get turnover. So we think about some industries that have 300-400% turnover during the best of times, now are seeing 600-700% turnover. So the organization was already in a rough spot. It got worse during COVID. But the organizations that had lower turnover, because they had good strategies in place, to your point, it was harder to pull people away from those organizations and away from those cultures because they had built the culture around supporting the people and making them feel valued. There was a study that Facebook did, I want to say is maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago. They were losing a lot of talent that had come on board. And people think about Facebook and they think about it's an amazing job opportunity. It's an amazing career. Who would ever leave Facebook? They have so many of these great things and these great benefits. And as they did their research, they learned it wasn't money that people were leaving for, because that's what they thought it was. And we often think of bad bosses as being the reason people leave. And we've all heard that in our careers, and it is definitely a big factor. But in this particular study, they found that the majority of these people leaving was because they were not getting the opportunity to train and develop and become the best version of themselves. The company wasn't giving them the opportunity to use their skill sets. They weren't getting exposure to new skills. So they wanted development. So they were going to other organizations that might have been pitching the same money, but over here, you're going to get the opportunity to be a part of different projects. You're going to get exposure to different parts of a business or an industry or a particular job type. So that really pulled people away. There's this drive that people have right now to want to feel valued, that they are contributing, and that they're growing. And that's a big part of that retention.
No, I agree with you 100%. You were talking about the people leaving bad managers. Like I said, going back to the Gallup research that I was talking about, you pulled for a recent presentation. It talked about it just on the employment engagement on the rise that Gallup did back. It was 2018. They found that 70% of the variance in team engagement is explained by the quality of the manager or the team leader. So you're going to talk about 70% of the variance in anything is almost impossible to measure. But when you're like, okay, with 70% of this, whether they're highly engaged or highly disengaged or somewhere in the middle, has to do specifically with their manager, that's huge. But the thing that they found in 2021 that I thought was very interesting to your point was you talk about the Great Resignation, and people they said it wasn't an industry issue. It wasn't a role issue. It wasn't a pay issue. It was specifically a workplace issue.
A culture. Yep.
It was culture. And they said that lost productivity of non-engaged or actively disengaged employees equal to about 18% of their salary. And you talk about real money. It gives an example of a company with 10,000 employees, average salary of 50,000 each. Disengagement, that 18% would cost them about $60 million a year.
Yep.
And I mean, even if you just take that down to 1,000 employees, right? I got 1,000 employees. That's $6 million a year going out the window. And they're talking about it. Replacing workers takes about, requires half to 2 times the employee's salary. And that's pretty low. I've seen 3 to 5 times in a lot of research. But even if it's, 50% to 2 times the annual salary, it costs $9,000 a year to keep each disengaged worker, and between $25,000 and $100,000 to replace them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's going to depend on the industry and what that looked like, but there's a significant cost with that turnover. And I think about the environment and the cultures of people, staying and leaving organizations. And it really does bring me back to, what's a culture look like? What's that good leadership look like? That people stick around and stay for. And I think one of the things I think about when we think about leadership, whether it's the CEO, the business owner, whether it's the shift supervisor at a factory or whatever role it is out there, looking at those leadership roles, there's this old paradigm that is still out there that my job as a leader is to be the expert at everything. I have to make all the decisions, and it's my job to enforce and hold people accountable. And that's a very old mindset. And there's a lot of industries that still use it. And for some industries, it may even still be the right method possibly.
Right.
But for the majority of industries and environments I've seen and been a part of, and people I've coached that have been in, it just destroys the organization because it kills loyalty, it kills trust, and it kills creativity. So when we look at what a good leader and a good culture looks like, it should, in my opinion, should be an environment that people feel valued, that as a leader, my job isn't to hold you accountable. That's a tactical piece of my job. Yes, I have to do that, but that's not the purpose of my job. The purpose of my job is to be a good steward for my team. My job is to promote my team, to support my team, remove obstacles from my team, help them become the best versions of themselves they can be. It's not about me and my ego and my goals. And I think about some of the great leaders that I've worked with and known over the years. They weren't subject matter experts, and they don't have to be. And I think that's one of the pitfalls I see a lot of leaders fall into. They have to pretend to be the know-it-all, and you don't have to be. If you get your team and surround yourself with a team that are those subject experts, that's where you start to excel. That's where you as an organization can start to blow up and people feel valued, that I contributed. My boss listened to me. My input was used, in the organization in some way. Those are some of those retention things that we see make a huge difference in people sticking with organizations. But if all I'm going to do is come in and be a drone, and I got a boss that's just telling me what to do every day, and my job is just to execute what they do, and I get no input, I get no feedback, and I get no development, to your point a minute ago, I'm out of here for a nickel. There's nothing keeping me here. And that's what a lot of companies have learned now during that great resignation, is that old model just doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely. That is true. And one of the things led me into kind of our first question is, what is leadership? We got 4 minutes left in this segment, but what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
Yeah, I think it really is around just being that good steward for your people. Are you approachable? Does your team trust you? Can your team come to you and say, you know what, I screwed up, and know that they're not going to get their head lopped off. They're going to say, okay, how do we fix it? What do we do? What's our next step? And it's a conversation. It doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable for their responsibilities, but there has to be this psychologically safe space that you can come to me as a leader, share your concerns, share your thoughts, share your ideas. You'll be given legitimate considerations, and not always are we going to be able to do it or use it, but you still have that freedom and comfort to do that. And that my job is to have your back. My job is to help you succeed. That's what I think the biggest thing I've seen in leadership in my career, where I have thrived the most, is where I've had leaders that have done that. They're not micromanaging me. They trust me to do what I do, and their role is to, how do they support me and help me get from A to B and be that best version. The ones I've hated the most are the ones that have been micromanaging, constantly telling me what to do, telling me how to do something in a way that I know is not the right way because I've got more experience doing it than they do. But they had that ego issue. So I think those are the ones that have killed creativity the most, because people just pull back into themselves. I'm going to do just the minimum. And that's that disengagement you were talking about a minute ago, because depending on the study you look at, you're going to see everywhere from 68 to as much as 80%, different surveys that have been done of employees are disengaged. 68 to 80% of employees are disengaged. They're not fully engaged, not disengaged, but not fully engaged, which means I'm doing the bare minimum. And how are you as an organization going to grow if your entire team is doing the bare minimum?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And I laugh because, and we'll get in, I actually do have some of the more current stats on that, but you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that if people aren't engaged and they're not doing that, I laugh about that active disengagement. I call it the unholy contract, right? Mm-hmm. It's the, I'm going to do, well, in HR, like I said, I'm not an HR lawyer, right? So just preface that out. Although I did learn the 2 words, it depends. And so that seems to be a very popular answer for most legal experts that I know. But I call this the unholy employment contract, or the unholy contract in HR, right? Yeah. I'm going to work just hard enough not to get fired, and you're going to pay me just enough not to quit.
Yep.
It's kind of like, I'm not happy, you're not happy, you're not paying me enough to stay, I'm not paying it, but it's just enough to, you're not paying me enough to quit. I'm paying just enough not to quit, and I'm doing just barely enough work not to get fired. And that's kind of like that unholy contract. But yeah, to your point, the actively engaged are 36% of the workforce, up from 34 in 2018. But I said 36%. 14 are actively disengaged. They are literally the bomb throwers. And then 50%, down from 53, are just like, don't care. Right, I punch in at 9, I'll leave at 5, don't care. Right, I'm here to make my money and
going through the money.
So yeah, it's only 36% are actively engaged. That's for sure. But with that, what's that? Go ahead.
The last thing I was going to say is that kind of before we go to break, I would say when we think about good leaders, I think about one of the people I love to follow the most is Simon Sinek. I'm a huge fan of his. When it comes to leadership, it's not a job, it's not a title, it's not tasks. It's a responsibility to care for others. And I don't think anybody could have said it any better than the way he said it there.
No, I think you're 100% correct on that. So let's touch on that when we get back. And we will go to our first break here on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. with our special guest today, Al Robinette, INO psychologist and practitioner of all things people in the private security industry. And we were just talking about what leadership means and what good leadership looks like. And you were talking a little bit about Simon Sinek, speaking about how really the number one priority as a leader is to basically look after your people. You got their back.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, and it's not, you can give somebody a title, you can tell them that their job is a leader, but if they don't have that mindset, it's my responsibility to care for others. That's what my job is to care for others. And that very much ties into servant leadership. And that's a leadership style that so many people have not adopted or don't take on that they probably should. When it comes to what it takes to be a good leader. One of the challenges I see that a lot of leaders are faced with, regardless of industry, it's universal, is that lack of being humble and the lack of being human. Is that I am this stoic figure, I am the all-knowing, I am the alpha, I am the whatever, and it doesn't create that safe space for people to connect with you. And it doesn't mean you got to go drinking and have beers after work and partying and all that stuff and friends on Facebook. And it doesn't mean you have to do all those things. But being humble is being able to say, I don't know the answer to that question. Let's find out together. That statement right there, I cannot tell you how many leaders I've seen fail in their positions because they could not make that simple statement.
Well, like you said, when you know everything, how can you?
Because they are worried about the perception. If I admit that I don't know something, then I am a failure. I'm a bad leader. I'm a bad manager. When in reality, if you make that acknowledgement, you actually grow a stronger bond with the team to be able to say, hey, they didn't BS me. They didn't blow me off. We found it together. We learned this together. We jointly found a solution. And you did your job as a leader by helping me get the answer I needed. That's why I came to you for the answer.
Which is a whole different ball game, because here's the thing. If you're acting like you're the best thing since sliced bread in the second coming, guess what? People are, and you're trying to hide all your faults and insecurities and everything else. They already know. I mean, there's some area where you suck at as a leader. Your people already know you suck there, right? They don't have to tell you. You don't have to tell them. They already know it. So just you being able to admit it and working on it, I think personally is just, like I said, it's definitely makes you more relatable. And when people can relate and connect on that more personal level, you're talking about communication versus connection. That connection is crucial.
Yeah, and I've seen countless organization leaders fail when they have that mindset that the team starts rooting for them to fail because they put themselves out there as being so perfect that they actually create this animosity with their team. The team starts holding back information. The team doesn't share everything because they want to teach that leader a lesson. And you get this very adversarial, toxic culture that happens with that I see so often with those leaders that have that bad leadership style.
And they've cultivated it. That's the problem is unfortunately they've kind of brought it on themselves, but
it's that narcissistic behavior. And I did an episode on that. So it was really interesting just kind of diving into the narcissistic leader a little bit.
Nice. Well, speaking about narcissistic leader, the next question is, what is one of the biggest leadership challenges that you've had to face in your career?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of mine. Very early in my career when I was elevated to a district level where I was overseeing multiple unit site locations. I had, a staff that I supervised and managed. I had gotten to that point in my career through my own efforts, through my hard work and my knowledge and being a good subject matter expert. And I was very great at producing the results it needed. But it was the way I produced those results, which wasn't the best of ways, but I got it done. And the organization rewarded me for that. And honestly, they promoted me too early, to be honest with you. I shouldn't have been promoted because I didn't have the leadership development skills I needed at that point to truly learn how to manage people. I went from managing a team of 2 people to managing, a team of 50.
Wow. Big difference.
Across multiple states, multiple locations. And I was bad. I was not a good manager. I was a very hardcore, aggressive, do what I say or get off the team, get out of my way. People were a commodity. It was a really bad way to lead, but it was me on a mission. So my job was to tell you what to do, hold you accountable, feet to the fire, you execute, we'll win as a team mindset. And that's why I mentioned before that I know that approach doesn't work, because I did it, early in my career. And we're talking over 20 years ago, but I had some good mentors in my life that pulled me to the side, and helped me learn how I was failing, that you cannot be a higher level leader and lead a team as a single person. You have to be a part of a team. They have to be together. And I'll briefly share an exercise that I had a mentor challenge me to do that I thought I didn't want to do. Is I had a team that was just completely falling apart. I was like, this is horrible. I'm going to get fired. This is bad. Like, this is just ugly. I don't know how to fix it. And he said, look, I want you to have the next meeting, give the team the room, and I want you to leave the room. Don't even go outside. I want you to go somewhere else completely, like go way away. Give them the room for 30 minutes. And on the board, you want them to write down everything they like about you and everything they don't like about you. And they don't put any names to it. And then when you come back, they can select somebody that will present the results to you. He goes, it is going to be the most uncomfortable thing you ever do in your life. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And then I came back at the 30 minutes, they were still going at it. So I had to step away and come back again. When I looked at the board, I immediately took that old school mentality. I know who said this. I know who said this. I'm going to go. I got that reactionary response to want to, get mad and defensive. But it was eye-opening and very humbling to see the things and how I was impacting their lives in a negative way. And I started doing that every quarter after that point. And it reached a point where it started being goofy, funny stuff. It wasn't anything serious. They didn't like my tie on Tuesday or something, or they didn't take the lunch that I took them out to, 3 weeks ago or something. But it gave them the opportunity to give me feedback in a safe way. And it was up to me to take that feedback and learn from it and adapt my style to what they needed. So for me, that was one of the pivotal points in my career to learn what it meant to be a leader and how my actions impact others, because I never really thought of it and saw it that way before that.
That's a great exercise. I tell you what, I would definitely recommend that to other people. That is a fantastic exercise.
It's hard. It is hard to go through that and stay calm and not get defensive, because it is so easy to do that.
I was going to say, I would imagine you would have to, knowing what you're going to walk into potentially, you have to really mentally prepare for that and understand, okay, I'm going to keep a level head. I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm not going to, that would be a tough one. But so transition from that, what do you think is one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today as you work with different organizations?
I think it's been that the silo mentality, not being open to other ideas, other perspectives, other personality types. I think that's one of the big mistakes I see quite often. And then I'd say there's probably three I'm thinking of, but not being open to, the different perspectives and diversity of thought. So many people are very siloed that this is what we do. This is how we do it. Not thinking of other ways to do things. I think I mentioned earlier again that unwillingness to be humble. I think that's probably one of the major ones. That would be in that top three. And then I think the other mistake is not developing their emotional intelligence. Not understanding who you are as an individual on a deeper level, and not understanding those that you work with on a deeper level. So I think there's this assumption that people say, I know people, I get people, I'm a people person. And it might be true for some people, but not everybody, and not the majority of people truly understand others. So emotional intelligence is that skill set that's a really important skill set that I believe for all of us, whether we're leaders or not, to develop, because so much of the things that we've talked about already tie back into EQ, because the emotions are driving those behaviors to be aggressive, driving those behaviors to be in the silo, driving those behaviors to react to feedback in a negative way. There's just so many things that tie back to emotions. But I think if leaders going forward, if they're able to be humble, be open to their team and make a connection with their team, that has a psychologically safe space, that is going to be the biggest game changer for an organization if they don't already have that. And I will tell you, the organizations I've worked with that do already have that culture, you can see a substantial difference in the team, just in their overall, how happy they are, how stressed out they are, how their perspective is of the future and what that looks like. There's just so many positive elements we see in organizations that have those psychologically safe spaces.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, it's when you don't have that, it makes it really difficult. Like I said, you get to the point where I think it forces people into that not engaged category, and to some degree, some that are on that category anyway, it really pushes them into the actively disengaged. I mean, I laugh how much COVID really shone the light on different avenues of management. For example, a lot of people were crying about, home life balance, work life balance, and, remote work and flexible schedules and things like that. And a lot of folks that were micromanagers just could not deal. They're like, if you're not here at the office and I can't put my thumb on you, you must not be doing work.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of years ago when everything shut down and you didn't have much of a choice, right? It's healthcare, some essential people, but a lot of people were, all right, well, now you're at home and you're having to deal with a remote team. Well, I mean, the world kept spinning, right? I mean, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, maybe I can do this. And I've seen a few people, I've read of one particular company in Northern Virginia where the manager now is spending, probably a defense contractor, so that's probably why they had the money to do it, but spending tens of thousands of dollars to completely get rid of all the cubicles that are there, put in new cubicles. Every cubicle is 3 feet apart, but then forcing everybody to come back when they're like, hey, we're actually more productive when we're not here. You know what I mean? But that manager is just like, I've got to have my thumb on them. They have to.
And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of cases of that over the last 18 months where those narcissistic leaders that have to have the micromanaging control, they took the remote work to a whole bad place because they made the teams be on camera. You had to be on video. We would have multiple video calls a day to make sure you were really working. And they were doing everything they could create to create control. And they just kept pushing these employees further and further back. And I think one of the things we talk about mistakes in leaders too is a lack of empathy. Empathy is not a lack of accountability. Empathy is a true human compassion and understanding for what people are going through. And when we think about the COVID and everything for the last 2 years with that, people working at home, the distractions of home, having kids at home, pets, a spouse or significant other who also works at home, there's a lot of moving elements with that. And then you have the healthcare people that have gotten COVID, and the leaders that have been able to demonstrate empathy with their teams as they've figured all of this out, have built a ton of loyalty with their teams because they've seen a human side to the leader. And that's that humbleness I was talking about before. I see you as a leader now through a different lens because you've been more humble, you've had empathy, you've been understanding as we've figured all of this stuff out in a new way that we work and communicate. And because of that, I'm very loyal to you. I'm not going to leave for that, $5,000 pay difference because I appreciate the way you've managed me.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned that because there were two things that came to mind when you were talking. One, I was looking at, if you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk at all, I like the fact that how he's talking about the last few years, he's really started to lead with this kind candor. He talks about, I was too kind and I didn't really tell people how it really was versus, okay, well, maybe I was, and some people are just more candor and less kind, right? It's just, like it or lump it, this is just the way it is, right? It is that combination. But there's a new book that he just wrote not too long ago called 12 and a half. And it says, leveraging the emotional ingredients necessary for business success. And it's a whole book on emotional intelligence in business. And these 12, and he calls them a half, that, these 12 things that he's put into place to really kind of engage that. But it's amazing to listen to that now, starting to really come around again, like it did when Daniel Goleman first put this out there is a hard number cost to this in an organization. And if we can get our heads wrapped around this from a business perspective and a leadership perspective, we can really, these soft skills aren't just fluffy soft skills. These are actual, workplace competencies that mean something.
Yeah.
So that's huge. So it is now time for our second break. So let's go ahead and go to commercial, and we'll be back here in just a moment on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. All right, welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are here for our third and final segment with Al Robinette, INO psychology practitioner and guru of all things people in the security industry. So with that, we were just talking about emotional intelligence. We were talking about Gary Vaynerchuk's new book, 12 and a half, that leveraging the emotional ingredients necessary for business success, and how really crucial empathy and the components of emotional intelligence are to running a business, being a successful leader, being a success just in general, but particularly for leadership. Say that, I'm going to just go ahead and, since we were transitioning from the last segment, going to go ahead and throw this out as a softball because, it's coming. What do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills? I got a feeling what your answer might be, but, throw me a bone and answer it anyway for the listeners.
No, absolutely. I think the very first thing for a leader to improve is they have to acknowledge that there is a benefit to improving. It is the self-awareness of the need to improve. Where there are leaders, whether they've been around for 2 months or they've been around for 20 years, oftentimes don't see a need to change my behavior. I don't see a need to improve or adapt or change my skills, because what got me there, they think will get them there, to quote from an old book.
Marshall Goldsmith book.
Yeah. So the first step is going to be that just self-acknowledgement that I could learn more, I can grow, I can develop skills, I can and be better. Once you do that, I think then it's around, what do you want to tackle? And I think it has to start with ourselves, understanding who we are on a deeper level first. Because if you don't understand who you are and why you do what you do, you're going to have trouble understanding others and why they do what they do. You're not going to predict other people's behaviors if you don't understand yours at a root level. So whether that's going through working with a one-on-one coach, whether that's getting a trusted advisor within your organization who's going to be that person that's grounding for you and give you real feedback that's honest with no retaliation, to say, hey, look, I think you're on point here, but I think you're a little off here. Or, hey, the way you presented that to this person might have come across this way. Getting that real-time feedback from someone. There's a lot of different behavioral tools that can help you understand yourself that I know Dr. Dave and myself and others use. So there's a lot of different methodologies that you can approach, but it's take that time to learn who you are, why you do what you do, what drives you, what motivates you, how you like to communicate, get those things all together. And then you have that ability then to start to understand your team differently. Why does your team behave the way they do? What is important to them? What drives and motivates them? Get rid of that paintbrush style of leadership and start using that whole palette of paintbrushes. Pick the small little one you need for the detail work. Maybe use a wide one in this scenario because that's what it needs, because it does apply to everybody. But use all those little different brushes. I don't think Picasso used one brush to paint everything that he did. So
of course he did. He used the same one that Mark Twain talked about, whitewashing the fence.
Yeah, there you go.
Wasn't that it?
Yeah, there you go. So that's what I would say for improvement is you've got to do that. And it's just so many ways. And I know EQ I've mentioned already, and I'm a big fan of EQ. I've shared it on my show. I think it's one of the most essential skill sets for us, whether it's in a work capacity or in just personal life capacity. That is a sorely underdeveloped skill set for us as humans. That we need more time to work on and help us on, because I think we would see a society change significantly if we spent more time on our own EQ development.
Very true. Very true. I was going to say that's, you're talking about different assessment tools and such like that. I mean, I think that self-awareness and knowing yourself and how you communicate, learning a little bit more about how to recognize that in other people, the different behavioral styles, communication styles, how to communicate with others, how to do that on a better level. Because I mean, really when it comes down to it, if you're not able to communicate with people effectively, if you're not able to really connect, because I mean, communicate could just literally be, I'm standing on a stage and barking at you. I mean, that's not really it is communication, but I look at, taking these tools and going to a deeper level where you can really connect with people. And I think connection is a lot more intentional than just, I'm going to put out a directive, I'm going to put out a memo, I'm going to communicate with you somehow. I want to actually connect with you as a person. If I could take that empathy and take that self-awareness and that, social regulation and social awareness and be able to take and actually connect with my team, I think that the results just speak for themselves.
They do. And I think, one of the other sciences I love a lot is the 12 driving forces. And the reason I love this is because we all have the same 12 in different combinations and intensities, and they're made up into 6 categories. But that's the heart of motivation of what drives us and why we do what we do, how to get people motivated. It's a source of where conflict happens oftentimes, and understanding the 12 forces can help prevent conflict or resolve it if it is happening. But the other thing is, it's big about recognition that I like, because I've seen people get recognition in the wrong way because their leader thinks everybody likes this tolerant recognition when they don't. It's not the same for every person. They're motivated by different things. And then I even think about professional development and succession planning. I've seen leaders take someone who is high on what's called collaborative driving force. They're happy being behind the scenes, being a part of the team, being a contributor. They don't want to be the commanding driving force. They don't want to be the face of things. They're not worried about status and recognition and personal freedoms. And I've seen leaders take people like that and push them into leadership roles, push them to take on temporary leadership assignments. I've got a client just the other day that works for a mortgage company that they asked this person to be a senior for 6 months, which is someone who oversees a lot of mortgage underwriters. They have a lot of leadership responsibilities, and the person has no interest in moving up in the organization. They don't want to be in that role. They're happy being an underwriter and being behind the scenes, but because they're so productive and they're so good, they wanted to push them into this role. And luckily the organization was smart enough to ask her, and she, politely declined in a way that and explained it, and they respected that. But I've seen companies in that same scenario force that person into that role, and they become miserable because it's not what they want. They don't want to be in that role. So then they end up pushing them out of the organization and alienating them.
Well, it's the stereotypical, you take your best salesperson, make them the sales manager.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 things happen. 1, you take your best salesperson off the floor. And 2, now all of a sudden you've got a horrible sales manager. I mean, they're trying. I mean, they want them, and a lot of people want to move up, but they don't necessarily want to. That's not where they need to be. Or they're like you said, hey, I'm fine with being behind the scenes. I don't want to be in front of everybody. Put me in a spot that I'm very uncomfortable with. And now what do you end up doing? You end up, like I said, alienating them. They do a poor job, even if they're trying their best at leadership. That, obviously alienates and pushes away a lot of the folks that are there that need that help and leadership and support. And it's not good for anybody. You don't have a good leader, and you don't have your top salesperson there either, and that's technical competence doesn't necessarily lend itself 100% to leadership in that kind of role, unless it's just specifically more of a tactical frontline supervisor role. But even then, it's still.
Well, and 2 things to tap off what you said. So number 1, the best salesperson could become the best sales manager, but is it the right fit for them? Do they already have the skill sets? Is there a succession plan in place to develop those skills so they're ready to take it?
Right.
So, but if you take someone who doesn't want it, to your point, and you throw them into that, then that's where you're setting them up for failure. But I find it interesting what you said just circles us back to the very beginning of our time today, where I talked about my bad experience. I was promoted because of the tactical abilities I had, not because of my leadership ability. So I was in a position where I was failing. I was struggling. And if it was not for some of these good mentors I had, I would have failed horribly. And luckily those mentors helped me and got me to a good place, and I was able to move through it and become, the leader that I became. But to your point, we set people up for success when we don't look at the holistic person. You've got the knowledge, that's great. You've got the tactical skills, that's great. But do you have the leadership ability? Do you have those skills, those people skills? Do you have the ability to get people to trust you? Do you have that ability to motivate people? Do you have that ability to collaborate with a team across functionally? Or do you have that ability to collaborate cross culturally, depending on the organization and the settings? So there's all those other skill sets that go with being a leader that I think we've got to look at the whole picture for someone that's going to go into that role, just not the tactical piece.
No, I agree with that, because like I said, obviously the higher you get up, the less and less important the specific tactical parts of it are. And I do agree that there really is a skill set to management, not leadership. So as you move up, it really goes back to the old, and I'm preaching to the choir with you, but for listeners that may not know, back in the day when they were really trying to outline, okay, well, what does scientific management look like? We're actually studying this field of management leadership, and they come up with this acronym called Positive Corp, and it was one of those, okay, well, what's the essential functions of, quote, a manager, right? And that's a different, because there might be people that are great leaders that are great, that can inspire people, that can cast a vision and run it, and they aren't worth a darn on any of these. But I mean, these, that acronym stood for, the essential services of management. It's planning, it's organizing, it's staffing, it's directing, it's coordinating, it's reporting, and it's budgeting. That's a whole different skill set than leadership.
Yep.
But I think when you're really looking to take that sales manager and from a succession planning thing, okay, well, how many people, what depth do I have on the bench? If my guy who's a great sales manager right now, sales director, if he gets hit by a bus, what happens? I mean, who do I have that can literally step in today and take that spot, right? Do I have the skills and train them on the skills they need on the leadership end of it, right? Emotional intelligence, leadership development skills, those type of things, people skills, but also do they have those? I mean, if you've only been responsible for filling out your CRM and your sales and your stuff, are you able to plan for others? Are you able to organize this stuff and, and put the staffing where it needs to be and directing things and kind of coordinating and doing all the reporting and budgeting that's required outside of just I'm in my lane and I need to make my quota and I need to make my sales? I mean, your tactical part. I mean, there's kind of like a duality of what needs to be trained for people to be able to take that type of position. And I think that you're not doing the company full justice if you're really great at these and not good at the whole inspiration, the whole leadership end of it. But on the other end of it, you could have the best rah-rah person in the world who's got your back, but if they don't have these skills as a business unit, you could still fail or struggle because you don't have those. Those are now the technical skills that you're starting to need as you start to go up the chain versus the hands-on doing the job type of stuff. But yeah, it really entails both, and I think it does everybody a disservice when you don't have that depth on the bench ready to go.
I feel like over the years, I've seen more leaders fail because of the people side than I have the tactical side.
Absolutely.
So the job knowledge, understanding business acumen, understanding the technical skills needed for whatever industry it is, I find most leaders can grasp those quickly. They've learned it. They've been in that industry for a while. That's how they got to the leadership roles. Like there's a foundational piece that most leaders have of that, and they keep abreast of that for the most part relatively easily. But it's those people skills, that's what's causing most leaders to fail that I see. It's not the tactical stuff. That seems to be easier stuff for people to learn than the people stuff for some reason.
Well, it's funny because if you take a manager or a director or a VP position and those are now much more a part of what you do, okay, well, now you're responsible for the budget that you weren't before. You're responsible for this and the other. It seems to be a lot lower hanging fruit for HR and upper level management to say, okay, well, you need to be trained on these specific things because I want that report. And so I'm going to have to teach you how to do the report because I want the report every month or every quarter or every whatever. Yeah. So I think those get taken care of more because they're more, okay, I'm the VP, you're the new director. I want my report every month. So I'm going to show you, hey, here's how you do XYZ report that I require you to do every month. So you're going to get that versus the people skills, right? There's that emphasis on it because of needing that stuff to go up the chain.
Yeah.
Versus the people skills, which is more, crossing down the chain, it doesn't get addressed as much.
Yeah, and I think if you break it out in the way you were just saying it too, there's a big behavioral element here that makes that difference. When you're taking me as a VP and you're teaching me the tactical stuff of this is how to do this report, or this is how to go in and do Dayforce, or this is how to go in and do whatever tool, platform, CRM, whatever tool or methodology I have to do to submit these reports, create these reports, you're pairing me with a person to teach me those things that most people look at as job training. And it's a neutral thing.
Right.
But if I say I'm going to pair you with this person to help you learn leadership, there's an anxiety that most people have immediately that you're assuming that, wait a minute, I'm a good leader. Why are you making me work with it? There's this personal ego element that starts to show up. That I'm resistant to that type of training or hearing another person's point of view or perspective around how to lead and how to motivate and how to manage, people, that ego gets involved, where it doesn't really get involved with the tactical stuff quite as much. So I think that's where the big differentiation is, I think, between the two styles of the two types of coaching or training that people go through in leadership.
I would agree with that. And I think probably the analogy that I'm thinking of right now is it's almost like in a guild, it's almost like a master and a journeyman, kind of thing. I mean, you're taking on a new, I'm moving up, it's why wouldn't you want to, or as a company, frame it in the right perspective to say, hey, look, we're going to pair you with somebody who's already at a much higher level, who's been doing this at this level for years, who has these skills. So it's almost like a mentor mentee type of role, apprentice type of role type of thing, where you're learning a specific skill set, i.e. the people skills and the leadership from that person, and that be more of a positive thing. And like you said, unfortunately, what it ends up being a very anxiety ridden, what am I doing wrong? Why are they pairing me with this person? I don't get it type of thing.
So, but this ties directly back into what I said earlier in the show is, in order to be successful, what do you need to do? You've got to be humble.
Yes.
I'm going to be humble to go through this training with this other person who's got more years of experience than me, that's got more time with the company than me. I'm going to be open to hearing their perspective. I may not agree with it. I may see it differently, but I'm still going to be open to this experience. In order for me to do that, I have to be humble and say, okay, great, give that training to me. Let me have this relationship. Let me see that. And again, that's another challenge that I mentioned earlier that I see so many leaders challenged with, is they're not willing to be open to that. I'm already great at this. I've already got 10 years doing this. I've done this for 2 other companies. Why? All these other rationalizations that go through the head that protects that ego and protects that person that they want to be seen as successful. Because I think everybody wants to be seen as successful. And there's this perception that if I have to spend time with someone else, there must be something broken with me, when it's not. So it's about getting the person to change their paradigm, their filter of how they perceive and look at this training, as this is advanced development. This is about elevating you, not about something's broken.
Which is a good way to put it. Coaching and mentoring as advanced development. Like, they really care enough to make sure and give me these extra training and skills that I need to get me to the next level, versus I'm just having to stumble across that myself. So no, that's a great way of reframing it, is more of advanced development versus what did I do wrong that they're putting me with the mentor? What did I do wrong that they're putting me with the coach? So no, that's a fantastic thing. So
huge way.
The last few seconds we have left, tell our listeners how they could connect with you, get in touch with all things goodness that is out.
No, absolutely. And I love connecting with people on LinkedIn because I open network on LinkedIn. So that's usually the best way. You can just search Al Robinette. It's the LinkedIn profile for me is Al Robinette. So it's a personalized link. And I think I'm the only one out there on LinkedIn with that name.
Enough.
So it should be pretty easy to find me out there as well. Love to connect with people, love to, just build relationships with people. I've got connections across so many different industries. Even though I spend a bulk of my time in the private security industry, I've got relationships and clients that I've worked with in hospitality, IT, and all kinds of other fields out there. But I love getting those connections because it's amazing to just hear other people's experiences and follow their journeys. And I find that every connection that I get on LinkedIn, I end up getting some kind of nugget out of that relationship in some way that helps shape or form or makes me think differently about things. And it helps me constantly reassess the world through other people's eyes. So I've really appreciated connecting with people through LinkedIn. So that's always the best way to reach me.
Nice. All right. Well, I would absolutely recommend anybody out there to connect with Al on LinkedIn. Like I said, that's Al Robinette, only one out there. And with that, we will see you all next time on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. Take care.